Our attitude towards life determines life's attitude towards us. Welcome to another Rare Leader Conversation with myself, Tony Jalen, and the wonderful and amazing, incredible.
Danielle Jalen.
You know, last week we talked about getting back to basics. And part of back to basics is getting our mindset right, developing that right, quote unquote, positive attitude. And so this week and last week, we talked about like understanding your attitude. And we're going to start there first. And then in the following weeks, we're going to talk about how to actually change your attitude. So, a quick refresher last week, we talked about questioning your assumptions. Learn to distinguish between beliefs and facts, feelings versus facts, to let go of your limitations. And we also talked about watching your language because words are powerful, choosing statements that give you hope and avoiding exaggerations that turn minor irritations into major disasters. Today, we're going to talk about two other ways to understand your attitude. Number one, examining your relationships, and number two, managing your stress. Danielle, I can tell you this. There's a quote that says, misery loves company. And when we talk about examining relationships, how contagious can attitudes be?
Oh, I think depending on your time spent in that relationship, with you and I, like we're together a lot, and sometimes we're not together a lot, and so that can make you know us our attitudes can definitely affect the amount of time we want to be spending together, and depending on where you're at in the relationship. So if you can have conflicting attitudes, that draws a deeper wedge in the relationship, or you can have similar attitudes that make it more enjoyable to be around each other, but at the same time, those depending on what kind of attitude you have as the similar attitude can make it more positive or more negative in your environment.
And that's true. And that's why it's like, you know, there's a quote that says, if you don't complain, you don't have to explain. And I think, when you examine your relationships, it's one like to think about, am I having like meaningful discussions and activities as well? I think another part in terms of examining your relationships and understanding your attitude is resolving conflicts promptly and limiting complaining. Like, I can tell you this, and I've learned this over the years with just in our relationship, how important it is. If there's a conflict there, like sometimes I want to completely avoid it. Like, I know I probably should address it before it becomes a conflict, but I don't. And then so now I've learned over the years to just, say something, or Danielle will say, what's going on? What's wrong? What's on your mind? Now, guys, what we do, we go, oh, nothing's on our mind. Everything's fine. But I've learned how to be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to respond too. When examining one's relationships, why is it so important to resolve conflicts?
Well, I think you might as well address it right away versus letting it eat away at you, because a lot of times the other person may not even know that there's something going on.
I mean,
And
we're not mind readers.
no, we're not mind readers. And
Oh,
so I think the more that you let time pass instead of addressing it, I think that just weighs more on you personally if you're not addressing it.
yeah, it does what, and what happens is, I think too, is because you don't address it. I think because that's part of what's inside of us, it becomes a magnifying glass on the minor things that, and turns those minor things into major things, which they shouldn't be. I think we see it often where all of a sudden, like either a boss blows up on an employee, or a friend blows up, or whatever it might be, blows up on the other person, and it has nothing to do with that situation at hand. Nothing. And yet, because we didn't resolve that conflict, it made that other thing a something, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So I think, wanting to understand your mindset and your attitude, Examine those relationships. The next one is manage stress. I was just talking to someone the other day, and they're talking about how, they're growing and developing, and people are coming to them for advice now and mentorship. And they're like, wow, that's like a lot of stress. That's pressure. Like, who am I to say I can be a mentor and a coach to someone else? And Billie Jean King said this quote. She's a famous Hall of Fame tennis player. And she said that pressure is a privilege. And I think when we change our perspective as it relates to stress, and understanding that it is part of life, we can find like constructive ways to release, quote unquote, the pressure, aka the steam, and hold on to our inner peace. So, what are some things that you learned for yourself to manage stress?
A lot of times I just need to like either go for a walk, work out, just take a break. And sometimes it may just be having a conversation because it's something that you're holding inside of you again, and it just needs to be talked to. And sometimes talking to someone um, helps to alleviate that stress as well.
And I think too, when you're talking to someone, I think we have to also preface that conversation and let them know, hey, I just really want to talk about something, talk it through. I just need someone to listen. Could you do that for me? Because sometimes we just want to fix it. And if I want you to fix it, I need to tell you I want you to fix it. Or if I just need to listen. So I think that's one caveat what I'd say in terms of managing stress. For me, I think what's helpful for me, and this is interesting, I'll go for a drive. I literally, some Sundays I'll like drive and I'll listen to like an audio or something like that, but it just helps me like walk through if I'm experiencing stress or pressure. Another thing I do is write things out. I don't know about you, Danielle, but journaling is a game changer for me. How about you?
Yeah, it helps to like just release your thoughts and free up space that doesn't need to be taken up by things. Because a lot of times I think you just circle around and around and around on the same thought. And if you just get rid of it, it allows you the opportunity to like free yourself from dealing with it. Like you don't have to deal with everything right now.
Wait, you mean not everything's a 911 emergency? Is that what you're
You,
trying to say?
for me, it is. You know that.
Oh. Well, I think too is that when we got all these thoughts in our mind, and people will say, I have ADHD. Well, a lot of times it's because they don't get stuff off their mind. And when it's in your mind, the thoughts are unorganized. And since they're not organized, it creates us to be busy and just like dwell on those things. So when you put it to paper, I think for me at least, I gain better clarity as well as I feel better. It's just like, oh, I just like release it from me. So we discussed today. I mean, we're actually keeping it very simple today. It's, you know, understanding your attitude. You got to learn how to manage stress. You got to examine your relationships. I think the final one is just to take care of yourself, staying fit. Now I know, some things are easier said than done. And I saw this meme just the other day about someone eating a lot of food and says, I don't know if you're going to lose any weight by eating all that food. And the meme said, well, with God, all things are possible. So I have faith. I think for me, at least, I realize when I'm pursuing things or I got some things on the mind that, honoring the connection between my body and mind is so important. How about you, Danielle?
Yeah, I think when you're physically not feeling well, you're mentally gonna go that same direction. And when you can do some kind of physical activity to release that pressure on your body, it also opens up and frees your mind to just the endorphins and to have more energy flow in a more positive way for you.
Yeah, like if I'm ever stuck on something, I got an idea that I'm working through, or I'm working through a challenge, I've learned, and this is actually probably more recently than ever before, just move. Like go for that walk, go get that workout in, go sit in the sauna, the steam room, breathe, do some meditation, like do some kind of motion. And I think, for me, as I listened to this, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks ago, don't do something like, if it doesn't serve you, don't do it twice in a row. So for example, I've been making a stronger commitment to, if I miss one day for working out, make sure I get the next day in. Don't miss 2 in a row, because what's happened is that 2 in a row turns into 3 in a row. I did think about this yesterday. I'm going to be very vulnerable here. I bought donuts on Saturday, and I literally was driving to the grocery store on Sunday thinking to myself, don't buy donuts twice in a row. And I did. So it tells you that I'm human too. But I think just having a good mind-body connection. You can get an app, like one of my favorite meditation apps is called FitMind. And I just noticed the difference when I'm doing that meditation of how much more present I feel and how much better I feel. So we covered the ideas right now in terms of like how to understand your attitude. And next week, we're going to be talking about changing your attitude. Like, what are some things that we've learned over the years in order to change our attitudes? And if you're listening to this today, watching this today, and you've got some other ways which you like learn how to understand your attitude better, please do put it in the comments. We are on YouTube, Twitter, as well as the Rare Leader Facebook group. As we close up today, Danielle, final thoughts.
Well, I think, going back to just thinking about relationships and stress and working out, like how those all kind of interconnect together. And I think when you have a feeling of avoidance, it's something that you really need to look at. Why am I avoiding? Like, why am I avoiding working out? Why am I avoiding this relationship? Why am I, what is causing that stress in that relationship? And just being able to self-examine, like it's coming from somewhere, what needs to basically be released, to help open that communication back up better.
Yeah. That reminds me, and there's a quote by Viktor Frankl. He wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, and he's a Holocaust survivor. And he talks about in his book his experience going through the Nazi concentration camps. And he said that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of his human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And when I read that quote, and when we think about, developing that positive attitude, realizing that no one has permission over how you feel, how you think, unless you give them permission of it. And two, we ultimately get to decide on how we're going to react to our emotions. I'm not saying don't be a human being. We want to all feel joy. We all want to feel happiness, and the serious emotions there are. But as you said years ago, Danielle, and I still never forget this, it's okay to feel the way you are. Just don't stay there. Just don't stay there. So until next week, I'm Tony Jalen with
Danielle Jalen.
Onward and Upwards. Go out and be a rare